Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Friday. It's a little bit nervous tonight because Richmond played Geelong. The NFL season starts today, and where are we? NBA Finals. The world is the sporting winter world is coming to an end. So that seasonal-based excitement doesn't necessarily translate to esport. And joining me to explore esport again for another week is the sports community esport guru, Cameron Uslan. Cameron, welcome to the live stream. And where are we going today?
Thank you, Steve. Happy Friday. You forgot the NFL as well. Kicks off today. It's all very busy.
I said NFL.
Oh, did you? Okay, I missed it. Oh, I was too focused on thinking about the NFL. No, I was distracted by this big G on the screen.
Yes. Why do we have a big G on the screen?
Shiny. So this is the branding of Guild Esports, which is David Beckham's new esports team, launched at the very end of June 2020. So they're very new into the space. And I bring it up today because David Beckham and Guild Esport have just announced about 36 hours ago that they are planning or intend to list on the London Stock Exchange. And that kind of makes it a bit of a monumental occasion because as far as they know, and as I can't find anything to the contrary, they will be the first esport team to be listed on the stock market in London. So I thought we'd have a bit of a chat about that. I think I might end up having more questions for you throughout this, but as we have a look at it and maybe think through some of the motivations of why David Beckham, well, I guess the obvious part is why David Beckham is involved in an esport team. Esport's the place to be, right? Everybody should be involved in an esport team. But why are they trying to go on a market?
I now know to ask a few questions because esport is that's like saying I've got a sports team. What do they give any indications of what type of games that they'll be focusing on or areas of esport?
Yep. So I mean, they've been going a little while. They've got some teams. They're starting to establish themselves. So 3,000 followers on Twitch. They got 4,500 on Twitter. Quite a small following on Facebook. They've only got 400 followers for a company that's looking to raise somewhere in the vicinity of £20 million on the stock market. 5,000 followers on Instagram, but they're mainly focused at the moment on FIFA and Rocket League, and I'm assuming that they will branch out, but that's where they've played so far, and they've had some competitive matches even in their short history already.
Yeah, it makes sense to obviously start with FIFA, given that Beckham's very strong history in the world game, and I'd suggest that those figures are pre-Beckham being involved. So it'll be interesting, Cam. We might actually keep an eye on Guild from the perspective of an audience build strategy over the coming months, because I think as we start to see David Beckham publicly endorse the team and promote the team and get involved in the team, and that engine behind it, it'd be interesting to see what tactics and strategies they use to probably build the team to be quite significant.
Yeah, he has been a vocal figure from the start, from their launch in June. But what I have noticed, he's not the only footballer that's gotten involved in esport, not the only footballer with a few $1 million sitting aside, given that a lot of them at the top end earn quite a bit of coin.
A lot of basketballers are in too.
Gareth Bale is another footballer with quite a bit of coin who's gotten involved in this more recently. Gareth Bale, former Spurs player. I'm rocking the Spurs jersey, but it's too cold to only have a flimsy jersey on at the moment. But Gareth Bale has been at the forefront of his team. So he stands at the front of their marketing. So this is the front page of Gareth Bale's team, 11s. You compare that with Guild. So Beckham has obviously, well, I guess, taken some kind of active decision in trying to build the brand on its own steam and not rely too heavily on the Beckham name. Well, he hasn't hidden his involvement. They're not trying to make it a big focus of trying to gather that steam. Whereas with Gareth Bale's team, which is only a couple months older, they they have him at the forefront of everything they do. He's involved in their marketing. He's involved in their strategic decisions. He's the front of their webpage. So, and I guess there's a bit of probably some thinking going in behind that I don't necessarily understand. I wouldn't really figure that David Beckham wouldn't be on the front of his esports team, but maybe that's part of his style. Maybe he doesn't like to be the face of everything, and maybe he's got a different attitude.
Yeah, historically that hasn't been the case with perfumes and clothes, etc. But it's two just different marketing strategies. It's one's going down the ambassadorial strategy, and one's going down the pure brand sort of strategy. And there is an argument to say that the pure brand strategy it creates if you can execute it well, can create a stronger. But they also may look to bring in ambassadors that are outside. Depends on the audience that they're actually looking for as well, Cam. So is David Beckham's audience of, dare I say it, middle-aged football followers and women, is that the target audience that this brand, and that will be playing into that decision as well, I'd suggest.
And I'm curious to see what kind of involvement down the line happens with Miami, the MLS franchise that David Beckham has a stake in as well. So
yeah.
I'm sure it's not the only venture that he's going to be involved in through the days. A couple of articles
before you jump off that. I mean, that then brings it to again, it'll be really interesting to watch this because. Esport at the moment, and this is why we're doing Esport Friday, it's like the Wild West. It's almost like there's no rules, there's no structure, there's no and the players are coming in and they're carving out territory. And then they'll fight for that territory and they'll defend that territory, and out of that territory will come structure. And if we look at what's happening in America, Adelaide Crows have come in, bought an esport team, but then underneath it are creating quite a really significant structure in high school sports and beyond that I think will expand and give them first right of access. So what we might see is the coming together of those two to while an esport team listed on a stock exchange around the world may be unique, having a sports franchise listed is not so unique. And we talk about the Forbes top 100, and we're talking billions of dollars, the values of these sporting franchises. So I think you're right, Cam. I think what we'll probably see is the combining of teams into sporting organisations like the Adelaide Crows in a small sense.
Yeah, and exactly what you were just talking about. I can't remember if it's this article in particular, but it's something that they are working towards. One of the reasons they've listed for their push to get on the London Stock Exchange is to raise capital, to be able to fund things like their academy program that they're looking at doing. And I would have thought that it's not too much of a stretch for me to say that David Beckham probably has quite the expertise when it comes to setting up, running, and organizing a functioning and working and profitable academy program.
Yes.
So, I'd say that's probably why he's looking at the space, and probably why the other people involved in the venture are looking at someone like David Beckham. I'd say there's a good chance they probably approached him and he didn't approach them. So, as far as trying to get someone with some expertise, I know sometimes. From my experience watching Shark Tank, that when you're looking for investors, it's not always about the money, right? It's about the expertise that comes along with them. Is that fair?
I think you're probably leading into as big a discussion that we'll probably have at some stage next week, Cam. I think money sits in bank accounts. It's the people that do things with the money that the real value is in. And so those two have got to come together, but individually they're not much value individually, but together they are formidable. So, and putting it on the stock exchange is a really good way of getting access to cheap funds, and B, a big broader exposure, but it actually comes it's an interesting strategy, and because it comes at a lot of overhead, it comes at a lot of risk, and it comes with a lot of compliance, and it comes with a lot of disclosure, and it comes with a lot of obligation to be reporting to shareholders. So it really is an interesting strategy to take something as fluid as an esport team, because if you're going to, typically the fundamental basis of the stock exchange is people invest to get a return on investment. So they're not typically, they might have long-term horizons, but they're not investing for a passion project. They're investing for ultimately a financial return on investment is why you would invest on the stock market. So again, it would be really interesting to be watching this over a period of time, Cam, and particularly as if they if they do list, then there's a lot of disclosure that we'll be able to get access to. And just see where they are making their money and those sorts of things. It'll be fascinating.
Is part of it that, or potentially as a motivator, that this is kind of like an avenue for exploring potential membership? Like it's a membership option going on the stock exchange. Like it's offering people in the community a way to invest in their team, kind of like buying a membership. Does that work in any way?
Your credit unions, for instance, are member-based organisations, but they're not on stock markets, and so they know it's in member-based organisation, and and you may or may not be investing in that. Well, it's the depositors that are investors there. So typically, where you're looking for a membership, you're not necessarily looking. The membership may not necessarily be looking for financial return, whereas shareholders, by and large, there's some exceptions, social projects, environmental projects, etc., may not necessarily be looking for, or would significantly be looking for financial return. But the reality is, these big players, and we could Adelaide Crows and David Beckham, and we can point to a whole lot of other big name players. They're not coming into esport because it's a passion project. They're coming into esport because they see the huge engagement of a world community. We call the soccer football, the world game. Well, I think probably esport would suggest that there's a rival to that, but not necessarily individually per game, but collectively. And so how does an entrepreneur harness that? And then it's fascinating. I guess my two hats, Cam, in this is from the sports administrator side, and what can we learn and what can we give, but on the other side of it, as an entrepreneur and coming out of the financial services, what's the business model that's going to underpin all this? I think is really fascinating, and I love the fact that we get to watch it from a really early stage, even though, as you've been pointing out, it's been going since the early 2000s, but it's now starting to get some real. Well, it has now got global traction in participation. So what does that mean for commercialization and also governance of the sport? And I did see overnight as well that 8 new countries have been accepted as members of, I get the terminology wrong, but the International Federation of Esport, I think it is. So, which again, that's all with a view, potentially, again, more governance structure underneath it, but also only sports that have international world bodies and country affiliates are able to enter the Olympic Games. So esports is kind of getting its ducks in a line in that way too, that potentially takes it into the Olympic Games. So a couple of things coming together in this one, Cam.
Yeah, fascinating. And while you were talking about it, the growth, I mean, we have spoken about how esports is an old sport in some ways, but I mean, there's no denying that the growth in the last probably 10 years has just been exponential year on year. So, and I keep bringing up this figure, but I just think it's just so crazy that in the next couple of years, we're gonna tip over the 3 billion gamer mark in the world, which is it's just a phenomenal stat that it just bewilders me to think about. So yeah, some of those growth stats are quite crazy. There's been at least 14% year on year since 2007, and they're expecting that to continue. So a big market, and the money that we're talking about here, Activision, which is the maker of Overwatch and World of Warcraft and some of those sorts of StarCraft as well. They've got what Round Hill Investments consider a $45 billion market capitalization for one company, which is pretty crazy. The makers of Fortnite, however,
it's going down. Go back to this one. Yep.
$441 billion market capitalization. So
and hence they're now taking on. They've got the relevance, the size, the magnitude to take on Apple and the other platform providers.
Indeed.
Or the audience providers, if we like. So Twitch inevitably will come into the equation, and YouTube, and
Twitch owned by Amazon, by the way.
Yes, Twitch owned by Amazon. Yep. To get it, probably what the content providers would suggest is a much more amicable and fair distribution of the revenue which they're generating, because effectively the historical value of an audience is the person who owns the audience, i.e. the platform, Amazon, Twitch, YouTube, etc., owns the bulk, and the content is. But that's no different to the North are publishing and putting out a book, and so now what we're seeing is the content providers, the game developers, and the players really pushing back and saying we want a much bigger piece of the pie to which we've created.
Well, to wrap it up, I just thought I'd take us slightly somewhere else really quickly, just to show sporting clubs that you really can grow an audience from just about anything, with a couple of examples really quickly.
Yeah.
Last night I spent far too much time watching this stream, which ran until probably about 1:30 in the morning, of a bloke from somewhere in Canberra who's built this remote solar-powered remote control car, which he's trying to take across the country night by night under the cover of darkness. And doing it all live to people remotely. So nobody is near his remote control car. He's 250 kilometers away from it as he controls it from his remote base. And it's just fascinating. He's just kind of starting this endeavor, and there was quite a number of donations coming in during the night as he's controlling it and talking about the various pieces of technology that are involved. And he hit a bit of a milestone, reaching the furthest he's ever gotten without coming into any complications. So he's developing his framework. Someone I sent you during the week is this guy Brox on Twitch. He had quite an interesting engagement with the Prime Minister of New Zealand during the week, where she visited him at his home carving station. So this is a guy who's managed to develop a following on Twitch, carving wood in one of the most wholesome ways you can imagine. He's such a great guy, and I love just chilling, watching him do his work. He's live right now, just carving a traditional piece of Maori art, which is really cool to watch. And just to show you how, like, what this kind of takes, this guy's up to 1.2 million followers, but back in March, he was in the maybe few hundred, couple of thousand. He's been streaming since 2019. His first stream was in April 2019. He had an average view count of 5. He streamed for an hour and a half. Right now, he's live to over 1,000 people, and he's got over 1.2 million followers. So,
so we need to be concerned, Cam. That's what you're saying, that we're only streaming to 5, and to those 5 that are here, or 4.
No, not at all.
To those 5 and 4 and 6 and 8 and 10 that we've had today and that are here most weeks and most days, we thank you so much. And anytime you want to post, just say hello, just put it in the comments, ask a question, etc. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that you've got to find your way a little bit.
Indeed. And sometimes it takes a fluke. Sometimes it takes something that sparks some viral. I'm not saying that football clubs out there, that cricket clubs, that netball clubs are just going to expect to one day have 1.5 million followers on a social media platform. But what I'm saying is sometimes you don't get that immediate feedback and you don't get that immediate growth. And you just work at it. Sometimes it takes persistence. And eventually it'll kick off. Maybe it doesn't kick off in this kind of a way where you go from, streaming to 5 viewers in March this year to streaming to 2,000. But things do happen where you find something that works for yourself and you get growth and you start to see the rewards of that. So I just wanted to show that it can happen quickly, but sometimes, you look at the quick growth, you look at this kind of growth, and you don't look at this period where he's put in the hard work and he's streaming to a few people, and sometimes it takes some time. But I just wanted to show that as a bit of an example of this is a guy carving wood and he's managed to find an audience.
The other thing to note in this graph, Cam, and go back to the graph just for one tick, is that the pinky orangey line is actually hours streamed. So it significantly increases when you increase more content, which is interesting.
Definitely not a rule, but I think you find that when you start to gain a bigger audience, you kind of want to spend more time with them.
Cam, we've just got Amos joining us for the first time. So, Amos, welcome to you. Thank you. And the Esport Friday, and you can go back and have a look at all 20 episodes on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel or our Twitch page, actually. But Facebook's got them all categorized by Esport Friday, and you'll just see the journey that Cameron's taking me, the novice, on and through this journey.
Do you know what speed running is, Steve?
I have no idea what speedrunning is, Cam, but I think we've just come across our next topic for next week.
Yeah, I tell you what, Amos, I think that's a good one to have a look at. So thanks for that, Amos. I'll leave that as a pending question because speedrunning is a very fascinating thing. So let's have a look at that next week.
Okay, so you know what it is. That's good.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a competitive thing. You play a game, you try to finish it as fast as you can. It's not a complicated concept, but it does, find some complicated ways of the methodology of implementing it can be quite complicated when it comes to games. But yeah, that'd be fascinating.
And the other thing I'd like to do, Cam, next week, because it's quite stark there that graph that we should be able to now go back to the graph again. If we should be able to have a look at what Bronx here did, and I too lost a fair few hours, well, an hour or so that I didn't have watching his wood carving and his very kind-hearted commentary that goes with it. But it'd be interesting to compare what he did in January, March, and then how did he change the content frequency, content type, etc. in April, May, June to have that exponential growth. So I think we explore that and speed running next week, Cam, as a really interesting side of it.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it.
Cool. What else have you got? I've cut you off a couple of times, and I'm actually quite terrified. I've got online parent teacher interviews in 6 minutes. So
do you want to just should I keep you for another 20 or no? Just
no, cheapers.
No. That was it. I kept coming back just to have the nice visual of just watching Brox do his work. There was nothing more that I wanted to show. I think it is a very interesting world, though. The idea that esports teams are becoming commonplace on stock markets is quite fascinating. So yeah,
and I love the fact that you're finishing with something that's completely different to esports. So watching how different organizations are using these platforms that are traditionally the realms of people and evolving them to their own needs. So be great, Cam, if you just chuck the link in for Bronx, the New Zealand wood carver, because I think that's quite fascinating what he does. It's actually fascinating that he's got 1 million or so followers doing something as niche and as people would in the first glance think completely irrelevant to their life and their interest, that that he's got 1 million followers. I think it means anyone can get 1 million followers. Potentially, Cam, even us. So we'll
Definitely. We'll keep at it.
We will keep at it. All right, so that's it for another week. As Cam said, the NFL starting today, probably has already started. And I have parent-teacher interviews, and the world, hopefully Victoria is getting closer to getting out of lockdown. The numbers are coming down. Everyone else is doing great. So we look forward to next week. So until then, he's Cameron Ursula. I'm Steve Palace, and thank you for being part of our sports community.